Hello and welcome to a special edition of GWTV Unstoppable, a year in review. As usual, I'm Sean Grant, but as you can see, I've got a new face next to me today. Cole will be my new co-anchor, as Casey is now the moderator for Colonial Crossfire. So, Cole, with your first words on television, why don't you break down what we got on this show?
Sure thing, Sean. We have some great content for you today. We will be doing season recaps for both men's and women's basketball, men's and women's soccer, gymnastics, volleyball, and water polo. There were a lot of amazing moments throughout the year, and we will break down all of them. So let's get stuck in.
You're watching a special edition of Unstoppable with Sean Grant and Cole Ann Schustige.
The season for the men's basketball team wasn't the slam dunk we hoped it would be, but it wasn't as bad as a LeBron James flop either. The team persevered through early adversity, and new head coach Maurice Joseph guided them to a 20-15 record overall, a 10-8 record in conference, and an impressive 14-3 record at home. With a real youth movement starting here in Foggy Bottom, all of these feats should be seen as impressive. While there were certainly moments that were tough, this young team should continue to grow next season. Cole, what were some of your thoughts on the season?
Well, Sean, I think we can both agree that this season was absolutely dominated by Tyler Cavanaugh.
Definitely.
Tyler averaged 18.3 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, and shot 40% from behind the three-point line. And in the 35 contests that the Colonials played in, he was the leading scorer in 23 of those.
Wow, well, and you definitely on a team, we mentioned this youth movement that they have, as young as they are, you really, really need a solid anchor in the middle like Cavanaugh, a veteran player who's gonna make all the right plays, knows the way that the offense should be run, so he can help some of those young players develop a little bit more. I really think it helped out guys like Jair, Toro, as we saw Toro come on later in the season. I really think it helped him to have that guiding influence, of Cavanaugh.
Yeah, he definitely brought about a sense of maturity, and that was really helpful because as we saw, there were a lot of growing pains for Mojo's young squad. They had a chance to prove their proficiency in out-of-conference games against Florida State, Miami, and Georgia, and they came up short in all of them. Also, they pieced together a pretty average conference record of 10-8, and this transitioned into an underwhelming performance in the CBI.
Yeah, and one of those growing pains I think in particular we saw came from Colin Smith. He was a player who started off the year very, very strong and who we thought might have been the star of the team. I think early in the season he averaged 14 points a game, around 8 rebounds, numbers that weren't too far off from what Cavanaugh ended up putting up for the season. But as the season progressed, he really his playing time started to taper, and then his production started to taper again. Don't know if it was the production first or the playing time, but as we saw by the end of the season, it really was. He only had 7 minutes of playing time a game, 5 points, 2 rebounds, so really nothing to write home about. When I got a chance to ask Coach Maurice Joseph about that, he said that was just part of his development. He wanted to slow Smith down, make sure he really got the fundamentals down before, so he really could be the star of the team going forward. I think we're going to see that. Let's hope that we see that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And with that being said, there were some pretty incredible highlights throughout the year.
Oh, definitely.
We can't forget about Colin Smith's buzzer beater against USF and Tyler Cavanaugh's game winner against Temple. And then finally, the last game against Dayton really showed the firepower that GW will bring into next season.
Well, and if we had seen that type of game, I think where they really put everything together and had that throughout the entire season, we would have racked up some more conference wins. You said they were a little bit underwhelming in conference, and if we had seen them play like they did in that last game against Dayton, completely different story. But I think that really does bode well for next season, given that Coach Joseph played so many freshmen, in that game. So I definitely think that's a positive.
And I think next year will be entirely different for the Colonials, with the contributions of Jair Bolden, Arnaldo Toro, Colin Smith, and Utah Watanabe. GW will have a 25-plus win season. And we can't forget about women's basketball either. The gritty play of the Lady Colonials and the strong coaching of Jennifer Azzotti made some racket in the Atlantic 10 Conference and earned them a 20-10 record and a trip to the WNIT. Lexi Martin, Kyra Washington, Hannah Schleibley earned themselves all conference honors. Sean, what were your thoughts about the women's basketball team this season?
Well, one of the things that I think I saw from this team is that they started off, they had a couple bumps early in the season. They had some weaknesses to them that I felt they ironed out towards the end of the season. One of those things we talked about was three-point shooting. They really just weren't a good three-point shooting team at the beginning of the season, but then by the end they were shooting 40% from downtown. So that was a real improvement for them. I think one game that sticks out in particular where I think there was kind of a turning point was that game against Syracuse. That was Syracuse Syracuse was number 14 in the country at the time, so some real stiff competition for them, and they did lose that game, but the score was 74-71, so they only lost by 3 points to a team that made a good run in the big dance for the women. So I think that was a strong point for them. They played really well. They really started to put everything together after that, and after that game, they won 17 of their last 24. So again, I think that epitomizes how they turned their season around.
Yeah, that success translated really well into conference play as well. They finished with a 13-3 record, and it was a little disappointing, though, that they didn't perform as well in the Atlantic 10 Conference tournament as they should have. But we love to see the high competitiveness, and that was awesome throughout the year.
No, yeah, we definitely wanted them to perform better. They might have even got their own invite to the big dance if they'd done better in the A10 tournament, but they really just kind of ran out of steam there at the end of the season. They started missing shots, and then once they started missing shots, they tried to force passes, which led to turnovers. In their last 2 games, they had a plus more turnovers than they did assists, and their shooting percentage hovered around 30%. So really not a good way to close out the season, but obviously we saw some positives here too. Malin Bautista, a player that we are very high on. She's a real true point guard, really commands the floor well. I don't know, what are some of the other things you see from her?
Well, I mean, as a sophomore, it's incredible to see the proficiency that she has out on the court. She's a floor general.
Yeah.
She can get her teammates involved, and that's going to translate so well into the coming seasons. She just runs the court with authority.
Yeah.
She makes fantastic passes. She tries to be a little flashy at times, but she's highly skilled, and I think that she has the ability to do that. She improved greatly as a three-point shooter, and that's going to help the Colonials a lot.
And I think, more we talk about her, the combination of her floor general abilities combined with Coach Jennifer Rosati and the kind of guiding influence that she can bring should really help the team going forward. I really think that Malin's going to be the glue that holds this team together going forward. Leaving the court now and centering it over to men's soccer, where the boys had an up-and-down season, but still finished with an above 500 record. What stood out most about this season was the number of draws for the boys, as they won 8 games, lost 5, and drew 5. They only drew 2 games over the previous 2 seasons combined. So, while the boys struggled to pull out W's in close games, they still fought hard. And it should be noted that they did not lose a single game at home this year. Cole, what stuck out to you in particular from the boys?
Well, the team ended with a total record of 8-5-5, sporting a 3-3-2 conference record, which was impressive. Also, on the Mount Vernon pitch, the Colonials tallied 4 wins and 4 draws at home. And you're absolutely right. The 5 draws this season were kind of an anomaly that put the Colonials in a difficult position that was hard to bounce back from.
Yeah, but a draw. Not necessarily a bad thing, it's not a loss. And one draw in particular, I think, stood out as one of the high moments for the boys this season. They drew against Wake Forest, who ended up being the number 3 ranked team in the country. So competing very well against a high level of competition. In that game, Arn Thor had 7 saves, and he held Wake Forest down into double overtime. So very strong performance from him. That's something we saw pretty consistently throughout the season. Strong goalkeeping and strong defense. You really need to have that defensive backbone in order to allow your offense to provide something for you.
Yeah, and we can't forget to mention the offensive firepower that the Colonials had. Garrett Hine racked up a total of 18 points, 7 goals, 5 assists, and he proved himself to be one of the best midfielders in the Atlantic 10 Conference. Hine took a team high of 43 shots with 25 on goal for a 58 shot on goal percentage.
Wow.
And with that, we cross it over to women's soccer, where the team had an extremely competitive season that was defined by a powerful record at home and high-octane offense from Mackenzie Cowley. The Colonials finished their season in heartbreaking fashion in the Atlantic 10 semifinals. However, they had a good season and showed tenacity every single game. Sean, what were your thoughts regarding the women's soccer team?
Well, I think if you're going to try and epitomize this team and really show what they were all about, I think you got to mention their goalkeeper, Miranda Horn. Miranda Horn was just fantastic the entire season. She had 9 shutouts in total, and given the fact that they play around 20-25 games, that's almost half of the games you're getting a shutout. And if you looked down some of their box scores, all you saw was wins. 3-0, 2-0, 1-0. Even in other games where she might have let up 1 goal, the scores 2-1, 3-1. So she was really the centerpiece of that team and what really allowed them to succeed throughout the season. Her and the strong defense really just led them to success.
Yeah, and that defense allowed them to post a 7-2-1 record, and the home field advantage was clearly present. The offense actually performed much better at home. They scored with more frequency out in the Vern, and that was great to see. And as you mentioned, the defense was the glue that held it together. So all around, it was a great performance throughout the year, and both sides of the ball, defense and offense, came together.
Well, and I think one game in particular that epitomizes all of that was the win they had against number 17 ranked Arkansas. In that game, Miranda Horn stood on her head the entire game and shut out one of, a very, very high-powered offense in Arkansas. And then in around the 70th minute, Mackenzie Cowley, who we mentioned being the firepower for that offense, had a spectacular header off of a corner cross. And, that was the 1-0 win. That was all she wrote. Miranda Horn, led the Colonials, and the defense led them the rest of the way. They picked up an incredible win, which I think was one of the high points of their season. We're going to go to a short commercial break now, but we'll finish the rundown when we return.
Raise high. This isn't just our battle cry. It's our call, our challenge. Because when you are called to Washington, you are called to higher expectations, to a higher standard. We are called here to advance knowledge, to serve society, to change the world. This is the George Washington University, and what we make is history. So stand up, be bold, take risks, press on, push harder, raise high.
Welcome back. Tossing it into the pool now with men's water polo, where the boys made more of a splash than their 15-11 record would indicate. While they did not finish more than a couple games over 500, they were 8-2 in conference, played nearly twice as many road games as they did home games, and competed in 11 contests against teams that were ranked in the top 15 of the country. Cole, what were some of the other specifics that you saw from them?
Well, Sean, I think the only word that you can use to describe the water polo team's season is monstrous. Not only because the players are 6'4" and weigh 190 pounds, but because they racked up some great wins and they showed tenacity in the pool.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of those tough wins that they fought out, and they actually played them 3 times, was against Bucknell. That was one of those ranked teams that they competed against. I believe they won 1 game, they lost 2, but at the time they beat Bucknell, Bucknell was ranked 9th in the country, and that was the first time that this team, in the history of their program, had beaten a team ranked in the top 10. But I definitely think we might see some kind of rivalry here with Bucknell, given that they played them 3 times, and Bucknell actually knocked them out of the MAWPC championship. I know I got a chance to talk to Coach Adam Foley. He kind of downplayed it a little bit, said, yeah, we like to compete against them. They're a good team, but he didn't really try and hype up that rivalry. But I don't know, I like that. I like the competition. So hopefully we see them be more competitive going forward.
Absolutely, and I think he did downplay it a little bit, because any time that you see a team 3 times and you get 2 losses to them, but ultimately end up with 1 win, there has to be some competitive spirit into that.
Oh, definitely.
But my favorite player this season was Bogdan Petkovic. The Serbian All-Star had another tremendous season. He totaled 127 points, which were comprised of 82 goals and 45 assists with a 40% shot percentage. That is incredible.
Well, and you see this team, you are losing Bogdan, given that he's a senior, he's going to be graduating, but they still have a pretty good youth base. Actually, Adikon Distichi, he's a freshman who was also recognized. He had even more points than Bogdan did, believe it or not. And so I think this team, will be just fine going forward. They've got the youth base, and then they're going to be able to transition out of this.
Yeah, I mean, you can count on the men's water polo team to continue their success in 2017, as they are returning a majority of their players. Yeah. And that sets me up perfectly for volleyball. The volleyball team had a difficult season with a lot of ups and downs that resulted in an 11-18 record. But there were positives on the season. Sean, give me your thoughts about their season.
Well, obviously the record overall is a disappointment, especially given how they've performed in past seasons. That 4-10 record in conference, especially tough, given that you always want to see your best record, if anything, even if your overall record's not that good, you want to see your best, subcategory of your record come against your conference opponents. They did not do this. I'm not sure if they were facing tougher competition than usual, or if they just had some chemistry issues on the team, but they weren't able to put it together. They even went on a stretch where they lost 10 matches in a row. And in some of those losses, it wasn't even close. They would lose 3-0 and looked like they were completely overmatched. So I'm hoping that they can figure something out in the offseason and turn it around going forward.
A really strong player this season, though, was Chidima Oshutsku. She concluded her decorated career with 5th All-Conference honors from the Atlantic 10, and she finished the regular season with being ranked 11th in the nation with a total of 154 blocks, and she concluded her career ranked 2nd all-time in program history with 444 blocks.
And now let's take a hop, skip, and a jump over to women's gymnastics, where the girls showed why they are one of the most competitive teams in Foggy Bottom. They scorched through the end of their regular season as they placed first out of 3 teams, first out of 4 teams, and first out of 4 teams in their last 3 regular season meets respectively. They then went on to dominate in the EAGL Championship, placing first out of 6 teams. Unfortunately, they couldn't keep the mojo flowing in the regional competition as they only placed 5th out of 6 teams. However, 2 girls, Cami Druin-Allaire and Chelsea Rainieri, went on to compete in the NCAA Championship. Cole, what were some of the other things you saw during their regular season?
Well, the overall record for the gymnastics team was incredible, and they ended the season being ranked 20th nationally. And like you mentioned, there was some phenomenal performances throughout the year.
Well, you talk about them being ranked 20th nationally. I think that's either the 3rd time or it's at least the 2nd time in a row that they've done that. And that's why I've said this is a team that we've come to expect to be competitive year in and year out. And you mentioned those 2 girls, Cami Druin-Allaire and Chelsea Rainieri. They both competed pretty well at the NCAA Championships as they both placed relatively well in their respective events, and they were competing against 84 other of the top gymnastics performers in the nation. So really just fantastic to see that high level of competition at the biggest stage in the nation.
Yeah. Overall, it was a very successful season for the Colonials, and they will look to continue their dominance in 2018. And that is all we have for you today. Thank you for joining us.
As always, make sure to like GWTV on Facebook and follow the show on Twitter at GWTV_sports. For all of your Unstoppable crew, see you in the fall, Colonials.